Forward to the next presenter, which is Paul, one of the key general partners from Pantera. I'm going to come back after Paul speaks to tell you about the approach that we at Keiretsu are taking to investing in blockchain technology companies. And so you'll see me again in about 10 minutes. But as introduction to Paul, this whole space of blockchain, cryptocurrencies, decentralization, ICOs, tokens, is obviously a new phenomenon. It's somewhat confusing, it's moving and changing fast. However, there's a few people in the world who are right in the middle of this space and are helping shape it and drive it. And amongst those people are a handful of venture capitalists who embraced the space 5 and 7 years ago, and are now leaders in helping identify, back, and grow companies in this space. Leading amongst those here in America are 2 or 3 firms. One of those is Pantera. And Paul is one of the founders of the Pantera Venture Capital Fund. He's also a general partner of the firm, and as Paul will describe, there are multiple offerings at Pantera. But I think we're very fortunate. Pretty much every event in the world would like to have Paul and Pantera presenting, and we were able to get him here today. So without further ado, Paul of Pantera.
Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Paul Veradittakit, I'm with Pantera Capital. I do have a message from, I think, some of the operations people here that don't throw the green lunch things in the trash can, but do throw them away on a table. So, just an FYI. So, I just want to get a little bit of a temperature of the room. You know, how many people have heard of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies? Okay. Looks like people are aware of it. How many have heard of an ICO? Okay, probably the same people. How many actually own Bitcoin or some cryptocurrency? Okay, about half and half. All right, so I'm going to start off by giving you a little bit of an introduction on Pantera. Pantera Capital is an institutional investor that invests into just blockchain and cryptocurrency related investments. So that means that we have a separate fund for each of our strategies. We started off with just Bitcoin, and so we help people buy just Bitcoin. We also have a venture capital arm that I helped start that invests into equity in companies. We also look at ICOs. So for us, we can participate during the auction, but we tend to invest early on and get high discounts and hold throughout the period. And then we also have our last fund, which we kind of consider a later stage fund for cryptocurrency. We're investing into cryptocurrencies that are already on exchanges. So that means that we can discretionarily pick cryptocurrencies, or we can use quantitative and machine learning models to actively choose cryptocurrencies in which we should invest into. But today, I want to just tell you guys a little more about, sort of why blockchain, what is its impact, and why you guys should really invest. So, let's get started. If you look at how money has sort of evolved over time, I mean, we've gone from the Stone Ages of just trading stones and other sort of commodities to all the way up to the gold standard, and now more recently fiat currency, USD, Euro, etc. Now, in 2009, some anonymous guy, girl group, Satoshi Nakamoto, created Bitcoin. And so we started seeing some of the early cryptocurrencies emerge, like Bitcoin, like Ripple, like Zcash. Bitcoin has been mostly used as a store of value, kind of replace it, call it digital gold. And then we have Ripple, which is kind of used for cross-border, replacing SWIFT payments. And last is Zcash, which is an anonymous cryptocurrency that's being used for peer-to-peer payments and potentially sort of enterprise payments. What we've seen starting last year is ICOs. And ICOs is just a new way of fundraising for companies and technologies where, and I'll explain a little bit more later, where basically tokens and value are sort of in the hands of consumers versus companies sort of holding on to all that value. And we think that there are going to be a ton of these new digital companies, just like there are a ton of companies on NASDAQ. So we think that there will be thousands, hundreds of thousands of different tokens going forward that sort of represent value in companies. One of the first use cases that we started looking at investing into is basically how companies are using cryptocurrencies to facilitate cross-border payments. So just like how the internet was built upon TCP, IP, and other ways to transfer information, we think that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies present a way to transfer money over the internet. So we coined this money over IP. And some people may not know, but there's actually hundreds of millions of dollars that are transacted across borders using cryptocurrencies. At first, we thought that people were just going to buy Bitcoin and send it over to someone else in China. But really, where a lot of these transactions, well, I guess for the Chinese, they do have incentive to just actually buy Bitcoin and send it over. But for other corridors, there are companies out there that can facilitate cross-border payments without people even knowing that cryptocurrencies is being used. So all you need to know is that your payments are moving across borders using some magic technology called blockchain. And it's faster, cheaper, and more transparent. So we're really excited about money over IP. Now, what makes blockchain advantageous over other types of ways to do transactions? It is a decentralized ledger where no one can sort of hack into it or sort of control it. Payments are done in a peer-to-peer way, and what that means is that no one can sort of increase the money supply, no one can sort of tamper the ledger, and so this is great for, people to transact money, but also any sort of digital asset can be represented upon this ledger, and any transfer of money or digital assets can happen without sort of an intermediary saying, hey, like this actually happened, because everything is sort of verified on this decentralized ledger. So it's really removing trust for any sort of transaction of digital assets. So what kind of impact will blockchain and cryptocurrencies have? Well, we think that this is definitely a category killer, but for us, we think it's more of a serial killer. We think that it's going to take a ton of time for a lot of these different industries to be disrupted. It may start off with cross-border payments, but then it may move over to sort of enterprise disruption and use cases, then maybe even banks potentially getting sort of disrupted in terms of settlement, and then eventually maybe we'll have companies and organizations that are run without any sort of governance whatsoever, decentralized autonomous organizations. So we think all of these different things and all of these different categories can happen, but it's just going to take time. It's not one of those things where, making this sort of disruption, it's going to take a lot of education, and it's going to take, a lot of ways and a lot of innovation to kind of create this adoption. So what sort of areas are we investing in right now? This is a little bit more focused on our ICO strategy. We're investing into tokens, decentralized companies. But our thesis is basically two different areas. Areas that decentralization can sort of enable the market. And a lot of that happens around gaming and gambling, where these are heavily regulated industries. And if you can bring decentralization into these industries where payments can be done in a peer-to-peer manner, and there is no house that collects fees, then it actually becomes legal around the world, and you can't sort of regulate it. So, this is a way to sort of enable a new worldwide casino, game, etc. And that's what we think about sort of new markets. In terms of disrupting legacy markets, basically industries where there are intermediaries or companies that are taking a lot of fees for the services and things that they provide, like banks and unlike sort of companies that provide, marketplaces and peer-to-peer services. We think with the invention of smart contracts and being able to enable a lot of these services and sort of payments and everything to sort of happen in a peer-to-peer way, things like Ubers and Airbnbs and even freelance marketplaces can be disrupted using smart contracts and cryptocurrencies to be able to sort of accelerate the network effect around adoption of users. So those are the two areas where we focus a lot of our investments into. And we think that these are some of the areas where we'll start seeing some decentralized applications emerge. So I mentioned sharing economy, Origin does decentralized marketplaces. We have Tari that does event ticketing. So imagine being able to sort of authenticate and record transactions of tickets on a decentralized ledger and be able to interact with someone else directly in a peer-to-peer way without having to go through a Ticketmaster or a StubHub. That becomes extremely compelling. All the way through gaming and gambling, and then of course even file storage and browsers. These are all areas where there are intermediaries like Dropbox that take huge amounts of fees, where you can basically get rewarded by contributing your excess storage and then be able to share that directly with each other. So why invest into this industry? Why follow crazy people like me? Well, what's neat about this industry is that, again, now you're sort of taking sort of control and power away from some of the large conglomerates and being able to sort of crowdfund and bring a lot of that value over to your users themselves. And we think that is mutually beneficial. And so it's a different way to sort of build a company. And we think that that's, it's a win-win situation. So what we observed in our space is that, in the past, the protocol layer, TCP/IP, there was no value in it whatsoever to build all of your companies and applications on top of the internet. And all of that value went to companies like Google, Amazon, and Facebook. Well, what we're seeing right now is that this was the past, and you look at all of the protocols, all the different technologies, underlying technologies, the value of the underlying technologies actually contributes to about 97% of the value in the blockchain ecosystem. The companies that are built on top of those protocols or technologies actually only encompass about 3%. So companies like Coinbase, the wallets and exchanges, and some of the other sort of applications, they're representing right now a small portion of the value. Now, I don't think it's going to look this way in the future. I think that the application layer will increase in terms of market share, but for the time being, most of the value is in underlying technologies. If you look at the market size of cryptocurrencies right now, it's at $300 billion. But if you look at just a sampling of some of the different areas and industries and markets that cryptocurrencies can disrupt, looking at global remittances of 429 billion, global digital payments of 3 trillion, even if Bitcoin, for instance, just gets a decent market share of digital gold. Gold is a $7.5 trillion market, so there's definitely a lot more room to grow for cryptocurrencies. I think this is going to be sort of a projection of how things may kind of look in the future, where started off in 2013, and that's how we kind of created the Bitcoin Fund. This was the only sort of way to get exposure to cryptocurrency, is buying Bitcoin. Now we've seen over the years that the market cap of Bitcoin has been decreasing. It's now probably around, actually it's hovering around 50% right now. But I think, as this asset class gets bigger and bigger, and there's a lot more fragmentation, Bitcoin could drop to 20% or 10% of the market cap. But we think that the market cap of cryptocurrencies in general can be, sort of increasing from 500 billion to 1 trillion to even 10 trillion in years. So that's kind of where we're seeing things go. And as you can see, Bitcoin is definitely not a stable investment. It's very volatile, but as you can see over time and year over year, it's continued to increase. It's continuing to build network effect and use cases. And so the hope for us is as we're investing into new cryptocurrencies, they can potentially build users, build a community, build a network effect, and sort of reach the same sort of level that Bitcoin has reached. So this is the last slide. I mean, as I mentioned, we have, let's see, Bitcoin Fund, which is just a Bitcoin, which is buying Bitcoin. That's a hedge fund. Our ICO fund and our digital asset fund, they're both hedge funds. And then we have a venture capital fund that is a traditional 10-year venture fund. So I believe that's it in terms of what I have for today. And hopefully that gave a little bit of an overview of our fund and our strategies across all the different types of assets. Happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards too.
Yes, we're going to take the questions after I present. So Paul, if you would stay,
Sure.
But thank you very much, and we really appreciate your time. I'm going to take the clicker from you, and then I'll call you back up for the Q&A.
Sure.
Okay. So thank you very much. So if that is an example and a viewpoint from one of the top 3 or 4 investors in America into this space, what I now want to present is the product, if you will, that we've created for Keiretsu forum members and other investors to participate into this space. And we've attempted to be extremely thoughtful. So in a moment, I'm going to show you a unique product. It's a fund of funds focused on the world's leading blockchain venture investors. It's focused on equity investing in the underlying companies, not so much ICOs and tokens. It already has access to the leading firms in the States, and unlike most other products, it is available for normal individual investors, but we have built it on an institutional platform with an institutional cost structure. This product that I'm about to show, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Fidelity do not have this product. And we think that we are very fortunate that we had the access and we were in the right place at the right time. I have to show you that, the disclaimer. I wanted to just very, very quickly start with this point. You've seen this chart a lot. These are 25-year returns for different asset classes. Most of us are frequently solicited by financial advisors and investment firms who put us into the gray. The reason we're here is because the world's best returns come from early stage technology. These are the VC 25-year returns, but early stage VC knocks it out of the park, late stage VC less so. I want you to keep this in the back of your heads when we talk about this new space, blockchain. We at Keiretsu focus on all of these other emerging technologies, and the question then arose, how can we get exposure to blockchain too? Now, in the last few months, we've begun to see a few interesting blockchain ecosystem companies like CoinMe or OneWorld beginning to come to Keiretsu. But the truth is, these firms don't typically come to angel investors and old-fashioned sources of capital. They're raising their capital in other ways. I think that Paul did a good job of already teeing up that there's blockchain technologies and the protocol and the stack. There's crypto assets, and there's ICOs. As we looked across this space 3 years ago, Nathan and I and Alison and others, we decided that we wanted to definitely be in blockchain technologies and making investments there now, but there's a lot of uncertainty that made us question whether it was time to launch cryptocurrency products of our own. Meanwhile, people like Pantera have products that they can make available if your focus is more on the ICO space. So for me, this is the chart that each one of you should think about when you go home. If you do want to participate in this new space, this new area of emerging technology, your choices are focus on the blockchain protocol or invest in new emerging crypto assets. And up the other side, take traditional funding approaches, try and be an equity investor in these companies, or go into the emerging funding approaches, ICOs and the like. And there are product providers across all of this, and in fact Pantera has multiple products. Their VC fund is in the bottom left, their ICO fund is in the top left. They have their new digital asset fund, which is in the top right, and they actually have their Bitcoin fund, which is in the bottom right. So that they have a family of products. For us, we had to make the choice which product to launch that we thought made sense, and that is where our blockchain fund of funds sits. Our goal of this blockchain fund of fund is to collectively put our combined capital into the best VCs in the space who are taking equity positions in blockchain stack companies. The advantage is they also get typically large token allocations, which increases the return and accelerates the liquidity. But first and foremost, we want to have our money in the VCs who are getting the equity stakes in the leading companies in this space. So who are they? This is a map of many of them, not quite all of them. Below the line are the general purpose funds. These are the big five. We have access to all of these firms. The problem is, at the GP level, the problem is they're commingled general funds. So even though they're investing in blockchain, we can't invest in their funds, and typically it's a $25 million or more minimum to be an LP. On this side are some of the crypto hedge funds, and we're excluding them from our fund of funds because, as I mentioned already, we don't want the emphasis to be the crypto tokens. And then here we have the emerging VCs, One Confirmation, Blockchain, Block Tower, Pantera, of course, Future Perfect, and so on. And we decided to create a fund of fund to gain access here. Now, we were fortunate that my wife, who's the former CFO of Barclays Global Investors, the largest asset management company in the world, which is now BlackRock, already was chairman of the advisory for blockchain capital, and we knew other GPs, including some of the Pantera team, Future Perfect team, and others, as a result of some other relationships and roles. So this is where we are right now. We have a fund of funds. The first close was 6,049, I think it is, investors. We're only allowed 99 investors. We've already allocated the 6 million across these 5 funds to lock in access to them. Blockchain Capital Partners 4, Pantera Venture Fund 3, Future Perfect 2, Block Tower VC 1, and Castle Ventures is the spin-out of Fidelity. Fidelity is the lead investor in Castle Island, and we're an investor, we're an LP too. We've put institutional fee structure on it. I just want to very briefly, if I have a moment still, Nathan, tell you a little bit about why these firms. So this is Blockchain Capital Partners Fund 2, which we're in Fund 3. However, it's a who's who of the unicorns of the blockchain space. Names like Abra, BitPesa, Coinbase, Kraken, Ripple. These are the Wall Street Journal unicorns of blockchain, and they're all in Fund 2. The good news is Fund 2, yes. The good news is the fund we're in has the follow-on investment rights to many of these firms. This is Future Perfect, based in New York, former Intel investment team. Abra, Brave, Andela. Wall Street Journal just ranked the top 50 technology companies to focus on. 3 of these portfolio companies are on the top 10 list, including numbers 2 and 3 on that list. This is Pantera 1 and 2. You just heard it directly from Paul. This is their venture investments. But again, Ripple, Circle, Zappo, Chain, Abra, Brave, Zcash, the who's who of the blockchain space. Our hypothesis is this space is going to be owned by the insiders, and rather than compete with them, we're giving them our capital and asking them to invest it. These 2 funds, Fund 1 and 2, Dave and Paul just announced that Fund 3, which we're in, picks up the follow-on investment rights on these portfolio companies, since they are all fully invested. We put it on an institutional platform, and this is my last slide. So Cole Freeman is the leading crypto law firm based in San Francisco, and actually did the Polychain, the blockchain capital, and other BitBull work. Kranz is a fund administrator that also serves people like Polychain and Blockchain Capital, and they're our fund administrator. Our auditor is very knowledgeable in the space, and we've outsourced our CFO, Betty, who is actually from Kranz, and is also the Blockchain Capital Partners CFO. So even though we're a tiny fund, we're sitting on an institutional platform in terms of our service providers and our cost structure. So, again, the takeaways. If you're interested in this space, you decide what your own investment strategy is. But if, like us, you do want to be in the space, please join us in a unique fund of funds with access to the best VCs at a low institutional cost structure, and we need to lock in our access now. So I, by the way, by design, left these spaces. We're also talking to the next handful of leaders in the space, but we need a little more capital to lock down those allocations. Our goal is to be essentially LPs in Sequoia, Kleiner, and Andreessen in 96, 97, rather than today, where you need 25 million to even participate. The gold sheet has us down, so please check the